should be enough. All right, so second week in September. How about it?
Uh, Felt like it
Um,
was just like May, like last week.
I know, right? Um, and with September comes the Ethereum merge.
Does.
That is September
15th, I think, is their
fifth,
date.
the 15th. Yeah,
Something around that.
as far as we know. So the whole move from proof of work to proof of stake. Big news in the world of crypto, especially for layer ones. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I don't, you know, I don't know beyond, like, I haven't done much research beyond, like, you know, the obviously knowing that it's moving from proof of stake to, or proof of work to proof of stake. Um, you know, with the merge, and like haven't done like super nuancy research from like a technical perspective, like what all that's going to mean. But like conceptually, right, it means that like gas prices are going to go down, transaction rates should go up, which is all great. You know, the what I do think is the most interesting is like what is going to be the impact of that to like Polygon, like all the layer twos that are built on top of Ethereum, right? Does that mean that they become obsolete? Does that mean that they become, you know, negligible besides certain use cases? Does that mean like a lot of things that were originally done on maybe Polygon or, you know, another layer two may now kind of start moving to back to Ethereum mainnet? Like, is this the end of rollups? Who knows? Thoughts?
I think if it had happened a year ago, I think that scenario you just described had a possibility. I'm not sure if it's going to happen now because I think some of these sidechain layer twos are too entrenched and
Yeah.
too built up. I also believe, and this could be wrong, so don't quote me on. Well, you can quote me on it, but it could be wrong. Um, I think they're doing the proof of work to proof of stake right now, but it's still going to be another 6 to 12 months before they get their roll ups and their um, zero knowledge, you know, layer two section that's built into Ethereum online and working.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that gas prices are going to come down that significantly right now, but I think that in another year they'll come down significantly. Now that might change depending on the date of when they get their roll-ups and stuff internal, but I do think there'll be some changes personally. I just don't think it'll be as dramatic against the other blockchains as I kind of hoped a year ago.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, so I agree, right? That if it had come earlier, like they've already, like the layer, a lot of the layer twos have already captured like such a big market share. It'd be kind of like ridiculous for them to think that they would just kind of absolve into existence. But what I do think is interesting is that it, you know, it potentially in one world makes the layer two like even costs and transaction times go faster, which means that like now this opens up like a swath of new opportunities for like different ideas and things that typically might have been not necessarily like cost prohibitive, but like transaction from a UI UX perspective prohibitive because it like just would have been, you know, things are slow, they take time. So like, can you start like, is there a world where like with this coming on, you start to see much more like deeper deeper actual like distributed applications than what we have now? Because, you know, if you look at a lot of the web 2 applications, they are you know, in reality like what, like 90% web 2 and like 10% web 3, like just basically some of that core ownership and provenance tracking of the digital assets is on the web 3, but majority of the existing like infrastructure like pub sub networks and all these microservices and things that make the site function is all still very much web 2 centric. So like, do we start to see a bigger shift from, you know, this fractionalized web 3 experience into these much more like hardcore, like more will be on chain whether that be, this hybrid approach where platforms are building like I would call like high transaction services on a layer two, and then tying that back with some of the bookkeeping record keeping that's done on layer twos now back down to layer one. So you start to see much more like hybrid chains approaches where you're basically using, you could kind of think about like if you were using, maybe I don't know, Google's like pub sub services for one part of your site, and then Amazon buckets for storage because one is better than the other. So you start to see these like not multi-tenant, but like multi-chain solutions that are coming out, become as there because of the merge.
I think that could be a possibility with Ethereum and its layer twos like Polygon and Scale and some of these other ones. And I don't know. I don't know, like if you described, I think that's a good idea, and I think there's definitely some possibilities if they can work out the whole, interaction situation.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought this was going to happen. It kind of has to a point, but I see it becoming more out there and more defined. I actually see with the merge more of a segregation of services to chains.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What do you mean by that?
so, what I mean is, I see certain services going to certain chains and building up a community there.
Mm.
So, if you look at things like Solana and Hedera, they're very NFT oriented. I mean, I've never heard of anything beyond Hedera other than NFTs and Solana. I know they've tried, but I mean, besides so many issues that they've had with the bandwidth, they just haven't really done much than NFTs to a point, but they've done really good with NFTs. Ethereum is still the king of DeFi. And that's partly because there's so many developer and user tools built into Ethereum, especially for DeFi, because it was really the only one that was able to do this stuff when it came out in like 2017, 2018 was the DeFi thing. So I kind of see it actually promoting more of a, for example, Ethereum's going to go where you want to do DeFi, where you want to do financial, banking, insurance, part ownership. I could see Flow being very heavily into sports NFTs and full use marketplaces and maybe games, and Polygon being kind of a, like you said, a hybrid DeFi spot where people can go and do microtransactions. I could see BSC still being the shitcoin capital of the world. Um, you know, like there's so many chains out there, and not that they're optimized for a certain service, but when a whole community goes and starts using that chain for something, and it
Right.
starts building that community, and more services come on, and more community, and more services, and more services, and it just builds, and all of a sudden it's like, why would I go to Cardano to do DeFi when nobody's living there for that? Just like
Right.
Tron. I wouldn't go to Tron for DeFi, but I would probably go to Tron to do music or peer to peer or something like that because they've had that market pretty heavy for 6 years. So I actually kind of see the merge promoting that. Whether I'm right or not, I have no idea, but that's kind of where I see this going with that.
Yeah, like I don't think you're wrong in like that. I mean, so that like scenario, right, of chains becoming specific to industry, I think is valid, and that's something that we've been seeing. I think even on our clients front, right, like clients wanting to go to Flow because that's where the NFL is, the UFC is there, the NBA is there. Like that's becoming, they just partnered with Ticketmaster. Like they're, that is like the sports chain where all of these other ones are. And when you go there, like the big upside is that you can start to like have your users circle around like a single wallet that supports that chain. Thus, therefore, they can log into all of these different experiences using the same wallet, and there, you know, it's not this fragmented like type of experience, right? And you mentioned Tron for music, you know, having other chains that are dedicated to like supply chain, you know, whether that be on like the IBM or more like industrial side of things, I think does make a ton of sense. And then like future state, right? Like there becomes this, you know, I would say like a better Uniswap or something that makes all of like this interoperability like super smooth, where it's almost like a wallet for your wallets that will kind of like blanket all of them.
Yeah.
Because the big challenge, you know, that at least that we're seeing, I think over and over and over, is that, you know, it's so siloed because of the restrictions around, you know, wallets supporting certain chains, you know, being able to actually use them across different Web3 experiences. You know, as you know, as it sits right now, you know, I've got like 4 different wallets. They all have like minorly different nuancy purposes, and it's kind of a pain in the ass to like deal with all of that over and over and over. You know, it's that you know, that whole idea of being able to just like sign in with Google somewhere is so easy, but like there's solutions coming, right? Like unstoppable domains,
Yeah.
helping absolve that. You know, I think, what do they call it? Like like your Web3 backpack or something.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I can't remember what Mike said the other day, but yeah, basically, you know, having your lunch pail of logins, and it
mm-hmm.
doesn't matter what blockchain you're eating at, you just use your same login and access buying something on every blockchain.
Right. Yeah, and like and with that too, expect, you know, if it, so like I had this like idea like years ago, um, a failed realization, right? Without any action, ideas are just kind of like meaningless, right? But I had called it Trade Winds, and like basically, and this was like 2009, 2010. But I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if you had like a single profile that basically had a way to like track your behaviors and preferences, so that whenever you go to sign up for a new site, they could pull in from those preferences and automatically tailor the experience for you. Because as of now, like as we all know, like every time you go into a new site, you know, a great example would be like if you're signing up for a new news site and they're like, tell us what your interests are. Like there's so much of my interest data out there. Like
Yeah.
if you just had that, and whether you're logging into a news site or you're logging into a game or you're like buying a new computer, and like you just log in, they're like, boom, here's all of your stuff that's there. And it becomes like normalized or done in a way that people can start to abstract, and therefore like, you know, experiences are tailored really kind of like on demand, would be cool. And that seems like but at the time, right, like that seemed really cool. However, with the structure of the internet, then you're basically putting all of this data into one centralized company that's going to monetize the shit out of it, and I'm not going to get any monetary return. I might get like an experience return where things are easier, but they would be making a ton of money on the back of my behaviors and preferences and data.
But you know and I'm probably going to hijack the thought process here, but
Sure.
you know, up until recently, nobody gave a shit about monetizing your data. I mean, companies did. Companies were doing it all the time. I worked for a company that we collected so much data on people going to trade shows and stuff. It was insane. Like I'm talking terabytes of information of where you were, how long you were there, how long you looked at this, how, you know, who you are, where you're from, why you're at the show. But nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit. Now all of a sudden, these last couple of years, something switched, and now all of a sudden it's like own your data. And is that because people are now realizing that, hey, I'm being used for my data? Or is it because certain people are telling people, hey, you got to earn your data because this is going to be beneficial for them for what they're building?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a couple different factors that go into it. I think one is that before, uh, it seemed impossible, right? How am I going to monetize? Like it's impossible to monetize your data before this. So I think that with blockchain and Web3, once you kind of like you know, what is it like? If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. But like it came in kind of this idea of like, oh wow, there actually is a solution where I can start to get it. I think the other thing is that, you know, over the past like 10 years, when we've seen the surge based, you know, within the, you know, the NASDAQ and, you know, the top Fortune 100, like the flip flop from the tech, you know, from the traditional companies to the tech companies, and people started scrutinizing their revenue models a lot more and seeing like, oh wow, like, you know, my data means ad placement and spend, and therefore it's draining billions and billions of dollars for these companies. And then I think the, you know, the third part to it is that like you have younger generations that are more cognizant of the value of the data that they're creating than we had before, right? You know, like my mom and, you know, and grandma, and like I would say, you know, older generations, like one, they're not using the internet that much. Two, I mean, I don't want to say that much, but they are. But like two, for them, it you know, it doesn't seem, that idea of it being a value place doesn't make sense. But for people our age or even younger, like, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old, like they live on the web and are spending tons of time there. So it for them, it makes sense. Like, I'm producing a lot of content here. I should get something for this. And like those three factors in my mind is something that's like led to this paradigm shift of, oh wow, like these companies are kind of fucking us a little bit. Like we should, I wish we had a way to do it. And then blockchain came along and like, oh, well, actually we might have a solution now. And here you go.
Yeah.
I also think they're getting better. Like, you know, maybe it's just a perception, but it seems like the way they use the data, you're being much more specifically targeted to like, well, that's my exact interest. How do you know? But then if it's like, you know, because I plugged in my wallet solution because I want you to know, and like, I'm fine with that. It's like, as long as I can track it and control it, like, absolutely tailor everything.
Yeah, and I think you said it. I think you brought up a good point, right? It's that if you can track it and control it, I think the controlling part is the one that becomes interesting, right? Like, you know, you look at something on one website, and the next 50 sites you go to, it like pops up in the sidebar, right? Or you know, you're thinking about buying new Tupperware, and then the next plate, you know, the next thing on your Instagram's like here's a nice sweet set of Tupperware, and you're like, holy shit. But in that idea, I think the lack of transparency on how much of your profile and persona is really out there does lead a lot of people to feel uncomfortable. When people feel uncomfortable, they start to do a little research. They start to look into these things, and then they start saying, oh wow, there's something here. So how do we get it? How do I get some of that control back? I think in my life is really important. And then of course, if I'm seeing how much is there, and then I'm seeing, you know, Facebook and whoever raking in billions of dollars, I'm like, I want a little piece of that pie, you know, just a little bit. I don't need a lot. I just need a little, you know.
That's funny because to me, like one of the reasons I brought it up is because like the control for me is the big thing, right? Like I hate literally like looking at something on like the internet, like just some brief feed, and just saying, oh, what's that? And then next thing I know, on my phone, on my computer, on my wife's tablet, all of a sudden it's bringing up ads for this thing that I happen to look at for 30 seconds or 3 seconds. I don't even give a shit. But for the next 3 weeks, I'm bombarded by these ads for this thing. And you can't get rid of them. You can't. And for me, that drives me crazy. As for, you know, the whole, are they making money off of me? I use a free browser, whatever. I don't really care that much. But that they can take anything that they perceive as something that might interest me, and then without any regard for what I care about, just slam in front of me constantly. I mean, that to me just drives me crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think it's all something that I think we're going to see flesh out. I mean, so the other thing too, like to bring it back to the merge that I think is interesting is that, I wonder what does, so one of the arguments I think that for around like the positive, which also may have a net negative for the merge, is that by doing proof of stake, you basically reduce the barrier to entry to become a staker and validator in the network. And if you're able to have more validators, that means that it's a more secure network. So instead of having to go out and buy, X thousands of dollars worth of GPUs and like set up a mining farm in order to like even be able to compete in the space, I can basically work my day job, do something I'm good at, make money, buy ETH, stake it, become a validator. And therefore you kind of democratize access to people to validate transactions on the train. But if you look at it, and like this is my question and I wonder about, is that, and maybe it's kind of moot thinking about it, but the recent numbers that I saw is that, on the Beacon proof of stake chain, like Lido owns 31.2%, Coinbase owns 14%, Kraken owns 8%, Binance 6%, Staked US 3%, Bitcoin Suisse 2%, Stakefish 2%, Rocket Pool 1.6%. So like, is it actually reducing the barrier to entry, or are you just now opening up and saying, or maybe it might reduce the barrier to entry of saying that you don't have to go buy a bunch of hardware, but instead it kind of reduces the barrier to entry in a negative way, because now it's like whoever's got the biggest pocketbooks can just, throw a bunch of cash in this and now become like Lido a 31% ownership of all of the validators, or of the staked amount within this new chain. And like, does that make it very easy to open up to like a 51% attack? Does this really mean that small people or, individuals are going to be making up a large portion of the validators? I don't know.
It's still, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still 32 ETH that you have to stake, isn't it? To be a validator? Isn't that the number? It's at least 32. It might be 64, but I thought it was 32. But either way, 32 is still 50 grand US.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
total. Yeah. 32.
That isn't, it's not ridiculously out there, but it's not cheap enough that, if you haven't been in it for a while and you're just an everyday guy, I don't know a lot of people that have, let's say, 60 or 70 grand in ETH that they want to just go and stick in to stake to be a validator. Right. Because you still have to be running a node full time, on something. And that doesn't even guarantee you're going to get anything because you're super small potatoes. So I don't know if it personally, and maybe I just have the numbers wrong, but I'm not sure if it I think theoretically, maybe it opens up the opportunity to be a validator. But I think in real life terms, I don't think it's going to make any difference. And I think you're right in that instead of whoever has the most equipment, it's whoever has the most income or the most, ETH that they can put in there that's now going to control it. And, that doesn't exactly bode well for decentralization, town criers. They're going to freak. Well, they already are freaking. So.
Yeah, all in all, like I think the big upside to it, even for that, is that moving to that is that you like kind of remove the argument about it, like this being super bad for the environment, which is kind of hilarious to think about, when you look at the amount of like cars on the road and like people like burning obnoxious amounts of.
Well, how many buildings have banks? How many buildings in New York have financial institutions? Take just the United States alone and add up all of the infrastructure costs and environmental pollution from lights, electricity, heat, air conditioning. And you're telling me that Ethereum uses more than that? I've always found that argument completely off.
Yeah, it's an easy armchair argument though, right?
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin kind of opened the door to a lot of that. So that'll be a good point, but the good point in that the migration will kind of absolve that argument that gets put on the table all the time. But I still am very interested to see what it does for the common man, right? Like, I think Lido as of right now is like toting like 4% returns. on staked ETH, which like, you know, is more better than like, I guess, a traditional savings account. I don't know if it's like the best return on investment that's out there, but it's, you know, I think a lot of these early ones are, you know, people investing in it are still going to be like passion investors, and it's not really there to like the get rich quick kind of thing. But that what it does to the security behind all of it, I am pretty interested in. And like, will they put any type of like regulations or things in place? Because Lido owning 32% is a lot. Like, I mean, that's a lot of staked ETH out of the total volume. And you get that above 50%, you're in very, very weird territory as far as what will happen to the security of the chain as a whole. And subsequently, like all of the layer twos, right? Like, you're putting everything at risk, right? There's a domino effect that could potentially happen out of it.
And the big thing with Ethereum for me has always been the security level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, it's always been Ethereum, you know, you go there for the security. And if you have to start questioning that,
Question everything.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to really say what the upside of being on Ethereum is if there's no security. You know, why take all the rest of the stuff with it that isn't exactly easy to swallow if you're not getting the security?
Right. Yeah, that's a point. That's a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big thing I think for this week is to try to think about, and especially looking at next week, what's going to happen. Maybe do some like live event to cover the merge in real time. We're staying up 24-hour stream.
That would be good. CNN, Gigster CNN. So what, GNN, Gigster News Network?
Yeah. GNN, the Gigster News Network. Yeah. Watch Corey become manic, trying to stay up for 24 hours straight and just getting weird.
Well, I have been watching it, you know, out of the corner of my eye, and knowing that next week I'm actually going to be, you know, probably actually glued, not because it's really, you know, like, ooh, what's happening now, but just I'm really interested because like the markets have not changed in the last couple of weeks. Ethereum has been dead level. Like some days it's like it doesn't even go up or down $1, it seems like. And I thought that there would be so much movement coming into this, and I can't decide if this is good or bad that there's no movement. So it's just interesting, you know, it just interests me to see, like you said, what happens next week, because I think there's 50% of the people are betting that it's going to be amazing, and 50% of the people are like, holy shit, it's the end of the world, it's going to go down. And I'm just like actually quite interested in that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised with so my take is that I'm not super surprised on the lack of movement, because, you know, like you know, investing in like traditional stocks, like the rule of thumb is that you never want to make a move before an earnings call, right? And this is basically an earnings call that's coming up, so everyone's just, I think everyone's just like bracing and being like, oh shit.
Well, I'm the person that's bucking the trend, and I bought a whole bunch more Ethereum this week, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Could be bad.
Could be great though, and you guys might see this might be the last we see of Ben as he retires.
It would never be enough, and B, even if it did, I need something to do.
Yeah, well, that's true. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate the time to chat with the lads. Look forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, our next chat should be interesting.
It should be interesting, indeed.
Post-merge.
What has been retired is going to be the title.
Yeah, that's
All right, guys.
Sweet.
See you around.
Later.
Thanks, guys.
Later.